Hello everyone and welcome back to Self-Sufficiency with Johnny Lee. Today we're going to talk about something that makes a lot of people nervous. Not just Christians, but Jews and Muslims too. Because if you tug on this thread, the whole Abrahamic sweater starts to unravel. The question on the table today is simple. Did the God of Israel, the God of the Bible, actually grow out of earlier pagan religions? I'm not attacking Jewish people. I'm not attacking a culture. I'm looking at a story that billions of people inherited and asking where that story really came from. When people read the Bible, they often imagine Israel as this little island of pure monotheism in a sea of wicked pagans. But the historical reality is very different. Ancient Israel lived in the middle of what we now call the ancient Near East, surrounded by other cultures and other gods. Big empires like Egypt and Babylon, local Canaanite cultures with their own gods of storms, war, fertility, and the sky. They shared ideas about temples, sacrifices, covenants, and holy mountains. Everyone had stories about a high God in the sky, a divine council, creation out of chaos, floods sent by the gods, and wars in heaven that shaped the world. Israel was not cut off from that. They were a part of that world. So when you open the Bible, you're not reading something that fell from the sky into a blank landscape. You're reading one more nation's attempt to tell the story of the universe using the shared language of its own neighborhood. Now let's talk about the God of Israel. If you listen to Sunday morning sermons, the picture is simple. There has always been one God and only one God. Israel always worshiped him, and everyone else was just wrong. But when you actually read the Bible carefully, another picture leaks through. You find verses that talk about no other gods before me, which only makes sense if the people believed other gods existed. Mention God standing in the assembly of other divine beings. Condemn Israel again and again for worshiping other gods in addition to their national God. In other words, early on, it doesn't look like clean philosophical monotheism. It looks like our God is the most high God in a world full of other divine beings. Over time, that shifts. As Israel's story gets retold, especially after exile, you start seeing a stronger insistence that those other gods are nothing. The God of Israel is not just the top God, but the only real one. That's evolution. That's development. That's theology changing over time, and then being packaged as if it had always been that way. Now, if you zoom out and compare Israel's scriptures to the wider world around them, you see familiar patterns. Creation stories that echo themes from older myths in the region. Chaos waters, divine speech, ordering the world. Flood stories where a God wipes out most of humanity but saves a small group through a boat. A high God of the sky associated with storms, thunder, and mountains, just like the gods of neighboring cultures. Holy war stories where the national God fights for the chosen people, punishes them when they disobey, then restores them. None of that is unique. What's unique is the spin Israel puts on it. Our God isn't just one of many. Our God is the only one that really matters. The building blocks are human and regional. The packaging is divine revelation. Another thing people forget, the Bible wasn't written in one sitting. It was compiled, edited, and shaped over centuries. You had older traditions, laws, and stories. Newer editors and priests who wanted to push a stricter monotheism. Political and spiritual crises like exile, defeat, and empire. So what do you do if your people's early history is messy, full of idol worship, multiple gods, and syncretism? You retell it. You scrub it. You reinterpret it. You make it sound like the one true God was always there, always talking, always guiding, and everybody else was just foolish. By the time you get the cleaned up version, it sounds neat and consistent, but underneath you can still see the seams, references to other gods, traces of older beliefs, hints that Israel wasn't as pure as later writers claimed. That's not how a perfect, timeless revelation behaves. That's how human religious evolution behaves. Here's why this matters beyond just Judaism. Once you see that the God of Israel grew out of a specific region, a specific culture, and a long line of older mythologies, you start to realize Christianity is built on that God, that story, that framework. Islam is built on that same God, that same framework, claiming to complete it. 3 religions, 1 family tree, same root, the God of Israel. So if that root is human, if that root is clearly made of borrowed themes, evolving theology, and edited history, why are billions of people still building their identity, their morality, and their eternity on top of it? And more importantly, why are you? So let me bring this home to you. If you grew up Christian, Jewish, or Muslim, you were told some version of this. This God has always existed, always been the same, always been the one true God. Everyone else is worshiping nonsense. But when you study the history, the archaeology, and the text itself, you don't see a straight line of eternal truth. You see a regional God rising to the top, a people telling and retelling their story to make sense of war, exile, and survival. Later generations cleaning up the messy parts to sound more spiritual and pure. New religions coming along and building even more layers on top of it. That doesn't mean Jewish people are bad. That doesn't mean Christians or Muslims are stupid. It means we are all standing in a world where human stories got mistaken for ultimate truth. Self-sufficiency means this: you stop bowing down to a God just because your ancestors did. You stop accepting a story just because it's old and wrapped in ritual. You stop letting a book define you when that book clearly carries the fingerprints of the culture that created it. Now let me talk to you like I'm in the pulpit for a minute, because some of you watching this, you already feel it in your gut. You've seen the contradictions. You've seen the human fingerprints all over your holy book. You've watched people try to defend it with emotional sermons instead of evidence. And you've been scared to say it out loud. You were told you're rebelling against God. You're being proud. You just want to sin. You're listening to the devil. But let's tell the truth today. You're not rebelling against God. You're rebelling against a story that was handed to you as if it were unquestionable. You're not being proud. You're refusing to keep pretending. You're not running to sin. You're running towards honesty. Because once you see that the God of Israel looks just like every other ancient God, jealous, territorial, tied to land, obsessed with sacrifice and obedience, you have to ask yourself, is this really the foundation I want to build my life on? Or have I just been afraid to admit that the myth is human? And if you're brave enough to ask that question, you're already further along than most pastors, priests, and imams will ever get. They're married to the story. You're married to truth. So here's my call to you. Look at the history. Look at the text honestly. Stop letting fear of hell or fear of rejection keep you chained to the beliefs that don't match reality. If this one true God needed centuries of editing, borrowing, and rebranding just to look presentable, if this eternal truth looks exactly like the product of its time and place, then maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop calling it divine and start calling it what it is: human. And once you admit that, you are free. Free to build your own ethics on empathy instead of ancient law codes. Free to build your purpose on reality instead of wishful thinking. Free to say, I don't know, and still get up tomorrow and live with integrity. Because at the end of the day, whether you call yourself Jewish, Christian, Muslim, atheist, agnostic, you're still going to wake up tomorrow and face the same person. You, not Moses, not Paul, not Muhammad, not a priest, not a rabbi or an imam. Just you in the life that you actually have. And as I always tell you on this channel, no one is coming to save you. Not Yahweh, not Jesus, not Allah. If anything is going to change in your life, it won't be because a God from an ancient story finally decided to show up. It will be because you stood in front of the mirror and said, I choose reality over tradition. I choose honesty over fear. I choose to save myself. Remember, as I always say, life is suffering. Death is mercy. And if they have to speak for God, they've already lost the debate. Until next time.